Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about an idea that Yoga and I had for using MorphMan to simplify the process of making the monolingual transition for people learning Japanese. Now, if you don't know what MorphMan is, then go watch my video from last week, because I'm just going to be assuming that you already know what MorphMan is and understand how it works and so on. So basically, the monolingual transition has always been kind of a pretty famous part of AJAT, but it's also been notoriously difficult. Now, I think one of the reasons why the monolingual transition has been regarded as so difficult is because the way that Katsumoto basically recommended people to go about making the monolingual transition was, in my opinion, very bad. And what Katsumoto said to do was just one day wake up and throw out your Japanese to English dictionary, just go back to your immersion, find a word that you don't know, look it up in the Japanese to Japanese dictionary, and then when there is inevitably words that you don't know in the definition of that word, then just look those words up in the Japanese to Japanese dictionary. And if there's words that you don't know in that definition, then just look those up, and you just continue to do these recursive lookups until you eventually find a word that you understand the definition to. And then you slowly work your way backwards. Now, this idea sounds really cool in theory, but when you actually try to do this, when I tried to actually do this, it just went awfully. I would spend hours and hours going like 10 layers deep into definitions. Everything would be a complete blur. And then when I'd eventually somehow work my way up, then it was just so recursive that nothing made any sense. It was like my brain couldn't keep track of it all. It was like, oh, this means this, which means this, which means this. And my brain would just break down and everything would be a big blur. And it'd be really frustrating. And I tried it for a few weeks and it never got any easier and nothing made any sense. So then I realized that one of the reasons why the monolingual transition is so difficult is that there's a lot of words that tend to be used in the Japanese to Japanese dictionary, but aren't really used very commonly outside of that in books, TV shows, conversations, and so on. And this group of probably 200, 300 words that are used very commonly in the dictionary and not used elsewhere tend to be very abstract, and a lot of the words are very similar to each other, like dekikoto, kotogara, jibutsu, monogoto. Like, they all seem so similar that it's very hard to kind of grasp what they mean, especially monolingually, because you look one up and they're just all defined by each other. So it's like impossible to just break in. And so I had the idea to look up words in the Japanese to Japanese dictionary, but then look up any words I didn't know in the definitions in the Japanese to English dictionary. And through doing this, it allowed me to get comfortable with all the words that they tend to use in Japanese to Japanese definitions, and also the structure of Japanese to Japanese definitions. And so I actually made a video where I explain how to do this a few years back. And I still recommend this method for making the monolingual transition. It helped me make it pretty smoothly. And I know that it's helped many other people make the monolingual transition pretty smoothly. So this method that I just explained is proven to work. But even after I've made this video, I still see a lot of people trying to talk about how to make the monolingual transition even easier, because people are very impatient and they have this like maximum efficiency mindset where they just want to somehow use programming or some other tool to completely take out all work and struggle from the process. And a lot of places, this leads to a lot of cool tools like subs to SRS and a lot of beneficial things. But sometimes it can be taken too far. And I always thought that in the case of the monolingual transition, this kind of effort to, for example, make a pre-made deck that would just teach you all the dictionary vocabulary or something, this wouldn't really work, because the dictionary vocabulary is only half of the issue when it comes to going monolingual. The other half is being able to understand the very abstract, dense, and self-referential kind of grammar structures of the Japanese to Japanese definitions. You know, a lot of times you know all the words in the definition, but you just can't tell what's referring to what, or how you parse it, or what it actually means. It just seems like a garbled bunch of nonsense. And so if you actually want to get to the point where you can get over that, where you actually can grasp what it's pointing to, you're going to have to just practice reading a lot of definitions and figuring it out slowly through trial and error. And if you don't really just jump in and get your hands dirty, going through that process of struggling, then you're never really going to come out the other end and really have a grasp of what these things mean. Being able to function monolingually is a skill that you have to develop through practice. There's no way you can get good at it besides just actually doing it. And so that's why I always thought that these ideas to just make a deck that would just somehow teach you everything effortlessly, or one that would like automatically generate definitions, and then you could find the definitions that happen to have already been I+1. I don't think that would really work in practice because you have to actually do training to train yourself to understand the definitions. Now, one idea that Katsumoto did add on later that I always thought was pretty cool and going in the right direction was he said that if you're having trouble going monolingual, then look up words that you already know the meaning to in the Japanese dictionary and read the definitions and see how the words are defined. Because if you're looking up a word that you already know the meaning of, then you can kind of reverse engineer the definition and see how the grammar and the vocabulary tends to be used, the actual way that Japanese definitions work to describe things. And I always thought this was a good idea, but it's kind of hard to apply practically, because that's like, what do? Just sit for 1 hour a day and try to parse the definitions of words you know? And so anyway, I never thought too deeply about that one. But after I kind of really realized the potential of MorphMan, and I was talking to some other Japanese learner friends, I came up with this idea. Well, actually, I don't even know if it was me who originally came up with it. It might have been my friend Calculus Say, so I don't want to take credit for it. The idea kind of, I feel like it rose out of a conversation we were having, but it was basically this idea to turn a dictionary into an Anki deck that could be put through MorphMan and sorted to find I+1 material. So basically, you would take an actual Japanese to Japanese dictionary of your choice, and then you would use code to basically make a deck where at the front of the card would be the definition of a word, and then on the back of the card would be the actual word that is being defined. And if you had such a deck, and you had already been using MorphMan up to that point, what you could do is get MorphMan to find the definitions for words that you already know, and then out of those definitions, show you the ones that are I+1. And the reason why this would be really powerful is that they're actual definitions, right? So you're practicing reading the definitions, which is going to help you build that ability to understand how the definitions actually work. But it's going to be pretty effortless because it's going to all be in an I+1 fashion, and they're going to be for words you already know. And so I thought this idea was really cool. And so talking to Yoga, I got him on board, and he used code to create just the kind of deck that I had in mind out of the Shinmeikai dictionary, Shinmeikai Kokugo Jiten. And this is my favorite Japanese to Japanese dictionary because it's one of the only dictionaries where the authors of it sat down and they actually just thought from scratch, what do these words actually mean? How are they actually used? When people say this, what do they really mean? And then they tried to describe those meanings in normal everyday language. Now, this might seem really obvious for a dictionary, but the reality is that when you go and look at all the other popular Japanese to Japanese dictionaries like Daijirin, Daijisen, Meikyo, Koujien, Iwanami, they basically are all just copying from each other. Like, one of these dictionaries came out 100 years ago, and ever since then, all the other dictionaries have just been copying each other and then slightly changing the wording so that they can't get in trouble for copyright. But they're not really writing what the word actually means today. They're writing what it's basically supposed to mean. Or, for example, what the kanji that comprise the word mean in isolation, but not really what the unique usage of this word. And so a lot of times, you look up a word in a Japanese dictionary, you understand the definition, but it just doesn't really seem to match up with the usage that you saw the word in. And a lot of times, this isn't due to your understanding lacking. It has to do with there just being a poor definition in the dictionary. And so Shinmeikai is a really cool dictionary. There's a lot of cool examples if you Google it in Japanese where the definitions themselves are pretty entertaining because they really just try to capture the true essence of an idea. Like, they had a really controversial definition for Dobutsen, the zoo, where you take animals out of nature and force them to be kept in captivity against their will or something. The guy who wrote the dictionary, his own personal opinions definitely come through sometimes. But in terms of learning Japanese, I found it to be the most helpful out of all the dictionaries, because sometimes you read all the definitions and they just all seem really abstract and don't really mean anything. And then just the Shinmeikai one, actually just explains what the word means. And it's like, thank you. So basically, what Yoga did is he took a frequency list, took the Shinmeikai definitions of the 30,000 most common words in Japanese. And then what he did with those definitions is he trimmed them down, he took off all the weird symbols and parentheses and like brackets and all that stuff so that it's just clean text. And then he took just the first sentence. So sometimes there's multiple definitions per one word, and sometimes one definition is multiple sentences long, but it's just the first sentence because you're not really trying to understand all the nuances of a word. You're just trying to understand the sentence so that you can understand the vocabulary within the sentence. So for our purposes, it's totally fine that it only has a portion of a definition because you're basically just treating that definition as a standalone sentence, trying to understand what it means. And then again, it's super cool because you have the answer of what it means because the answer of what it means is a word that you already know. But anyway, so after we had the first sentence of the first definition of the 30,000 most common words, then he also trimmed off like words that the ones that were too short or too long so that we only have ones that are a good length. And then after he had that, he just took the 5,000 top most common words and made that into a deck. So the deck that he has made for all you guys has 5,000 cards in it, and what it has is the clean version of the definition, what word the definition is for, and then it has the full definition unabridged. And so it has 5,000 cards, but the idea isn't that you're actually going to go through all 5,000 of these cards. The idea is that you're only going to have to go through a few hundred of the cards before you know enough dictionary vocabulary and have a strong enough sense of how definitions work to go and just jump into actually looking things up yourself. But the reason why the deck has to have 5,000 cards is because which few hundred of those 5,000 you do is going to change person to person because MorphMan is going to be choosing the most ideal I+1 sentences out of those 5,000. So you want to give MorphMan a big selection so that it can pick the very best ones for you. So that's why the deck is so huge. But you're not going to do all 5,000. You're just going to do a few hundred, and you're going to let MorphMan pick which few hundred you're going to do. So here I'm just going to give a little demonstration of how I would use this deck. And at the end of the video, I'll talk a little bit about practically how you want to make the monolingual transition, a few extra details and stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to start a totally new profile for this demonstration. Okay, so first, let's just actually take a look at Yoga's deck. So you can see 5,000 cards added, and it's called the Shinmeikai Definitions deck. When we go into the browser, we see that all the cards are in the Monolingual Dictionary Japanese note type. Now, if you don't have Japanese in the name of the note type, then the Japanese support plugin won't automatically fill in readings. So I think that's why that is in the name. Now, it looks like the readings aren't automatically generated because when you do automatically generate the readings, then there's going to be some errors, and I guess Yoga didn't want you guys to assume that he personally went through the readings or whatever, and so you can trust them. So if we did want to generate the readings, we could just select all the cards and then go to Edit, Bulk, Add Readings. This is if you have the Japanese support plugin installed, of course. And then wait for it to finish. Okay, and now we have the readings. And also, I just realized that we are currently sorted by alphabetical order of the word field, but if we sort by when they're due, then we actually can access the frequency order. So if you sort by when it's due, we'll see that the most common word is the particle o, and then the 5,000th most common word is ishu. So not that the frequency really matters for our purposes, but just so you know. So now when we take a look at the other fields, we see that the expression field is the trimmed and clean definition. Then we have the reading field. Then the word right here is the word that the definition is actually for. And then the focus field, this is for MorphMan. It's going to automatically fill it in with whatever the focus morph is. And then the meaning field is where you can put the definition, the English definition of the I+1 word that you didn't know. And then full definition is the full unabridged version of the definition. So we have the word motozuku. Here is the abridged version of the definition, which is just this first definition with the symbols removed. But if we look at the full definition, we have the pronunciation right here, the pitch accent, these two dots means that it's common, the type of verb that it is, how it tends to be used, example sentences, and all this other stuff. So that's all there for you to reference, but the actual sentence is just the main first text component of it. And so, if you take a look at what the card looks like, it's just going to have the sentence field, or the expression field, which is the sentence. And then on the back, it has the kana, and then the actual word. And when there is a focus morph, then that's going to automatically be generated right here. Add a meaning, it's going to show up here. And then you can click to show the full definition. And I think it's hidden initially just because it takes up a lot of space. And so it'd be kind of ugly if that was always on the back of your card, even when you didn't want to look at it. Okay, so now let's go over how we're actually going to use this to make the monolingual transition. So I would recommend making the monolingual transition after you are probably around 3,000 sentences in. And so let's assume that I have 3,000 sentences that I've already learned. So let's say that I've gone through the two Tango decks, and then I've also mined 1,000 of my own cards. So because I don't actually have any of my own mined cards here to show you, let's just pretend that I mined 1,000 cards out of the Dictionary of Japanese Grammar deck. Okay, so I'm going to go in and to the Tango decks, I'm going to add the already known tag. And then I'm going to go to the Dictionary of Japanese Grammar deck, and I'm going to add the tag just to the first 1,000. Okay, so now let's go into MorphMan. So first, we have to just tell MorphMan that I already know all the cards within these two decks and that 1,000 cards in this deck. So what we're going to do is go to Custom Japanese, no tag, Japanese, Dictionary of Japanese Grammar, Japanese, don't need to have it modify those. Extra fields, just focus, make sure, change the name so that it matches. Tags, I'll just do this real quick. Okay, so now I'm going to apply and recalc. Okay, so now it says that I know 2,400 morphs, and now we're going to go back into MorphMan's preferences, and we're going to have it sort the Shinmei-kai deck based off of what we already know. So I'm going to go to the Monolingual Dictionary Japanese, and I'm going to have it sort the word field. So modify yes, apply, and recalc again. Okay, so now when we go into the browser, if we click on I+0 and we limit it to the Shinmei-kai definitions, then what this basically means is that these are cards that have an I+0 word field. Now, remember, the word field is just the word that the definition is for. And so this means that all the cards that are in the Shinmei-kai definitions that are currently have the I+0 tag, that means that we already know the word that is being defined. And so that means that if the definition is also I+1, then that's going to be ideal for us to learn. So we're going to take all these cards that were just given the I+0 tag, and we're going to give it a new tag. Now, it doesn't matter what you actually call this tag, but I'm just going to call it word known, because you know the word that the definition is defining. So now we're going to go back into MorphMan, and we're going to have it only sort cards that have that tag that we just added. So only sort the ones where the word field is I+1. But now we're going to have it sort the expression field. So what this is going to do is, for the cards that we already know the word for, it's going to sort the actual definitions based off of how difficult they're going to be for us. So let's recalc again. Okay, so now if we go to the word known tag, and then we limit it to cards that have the I+1 tag, we see that we now have 130 cards that we already know the word that is being defined, and the definition is I+1. So that's pretty cool. We have already 130, and then maybe after learning a bunch of these, we can run the process again, and then there'll probably be a bunch more cards that used to be I+2, but now have become I+1. So to start with, I think 130 is a really great number. So, for example, let's take a look at some of these. So if we look at this card, it says that the word that is being defined is tsumetai. So that's a common word. It's not surprising that that was already in the deck that we already knew. And it says the word that we don't know, the focus morph, is kanjiru. And so if we look at the expression, it says ondo ga hikuku kanjirareru yousu da. So it's hard to translate directly into English, but it would basically mean feeling as if the temperature is low. So since this is the focus morph, then that means MorphMan says we already know everything else. So this means that this is the perfect sentence to learn the word kanjiru and also grasp how Japanese definitions tend to work because, again, we already know what the sentence means because it means tsumetai, and we know what tsumetai means. So we have a big clue to help us decode how the grammar is functioning right here. So now what we would do is we would copy the focus morph, just go over to Jisho and look this up in English, and copy that into the meaning field. And now our card is going to look like this. So just the definition on the front, and then on the back, we have the reading, what the word that the definition is for, the focus morph, and then the meaning. And it's already set up so that you have the color scheme I talked about last week on my MorphMan video built into the front of the card. So in this color scheme, the gray highlight is for words that you already know, and the yellow highlight is for words that are new. So we can see, yeah, it's I+1. And then if we wanted to click here, we can see the rest. So basically, that is about it. You can go through and add the definitions to the ones that look good to you and make sense. And then learn those cards, rinse and repeat. And then after you've learned maybe, 100 to 300 of the cards from this deck, you should have a pretty easy time functioning monolingually. So initially I was planning on talking a little bit more about the big picture of the monolingual transition, but this video has already gotten really long, so I think I'm just going to cut it off here and then make a separate video about that next week. So to conclude, shout out to Calculus Ace for helping me come up with this idea, and giant shout out to Yoga for actually making this deck. If it wasn't for him doing all the programming, then none of you guys would be able to benefit from this. So definitely go and give him some love. Go subscribe to his channel. Recently, he's done a really bunch of great deeds for the Japanese learning community. He has created a giant pitch accent deck with over 100,000 cards that has every single entry in the NHK Accent Dictionary and the OJAD website with audio. And he's also downloaded every single subtitle from Japanese Netflix and uploaded that for download. And he's also created Yomi-chan dictionaries for Shinmeikai, which is great, Shinmeikai, and for the NHK Accent Dictionary. And he also has lots of cool videos of him just talking about his experiences with language learning and stuff. He's a great language learner. So yeah, go check him out, and see you guys later.